Welcome to this month's forecasting forum. We have a lot to talk about today, and we got some really fab questions as well. So let me just start by giving you our first screen. Hold on. Here we go. So let's see, where are we here? Very good. Let me close this. So how many of you have a Scorpio, have any Scorpio planets in your natal chart? Like anything, whether that's a personal planet or collective planet. Is there anybody that has Scorpio planets in the chart? I'm sure some of you do. I mean, especially the people born with the Pluto generation in Scorpio, you definitely have something in Scorpio, right? And then I'm sure there is, most of you will. Ryan has Uranus in 18 degrees. Very good. Yep, the Uranus generation in Scorpio. Very good. Danny has his sun. Excellent. And then we have someone who showed up from laptop who says ascendant. Who are you who's writing from their laptop? Because there's no name that shows up. I just want to know who I'm talking to. Terry. Okay. Hi, Terry. Okay. Yes, I know your chart, Terry. I know you're Scorpio rising. All right. And you also have Neptune in Scorpio. So the generation that has Neptune in Scorpio, also in the 60s generation, has also definitely at least one planet in Scorpio. Now, how many of you have a Sagittarius sun sign, moon sign, or rising sign? So hopefully all of you have your chart in front of you and are able to know where the sun sign and the rising sign and the moon sign is in your chart. And take a look. Anybody with a Sagittarius sun sign, moon sign, or rising sign, because Jupiter obviously rules your sign, right? Jupiter rules Sagittarius. Okay, nobody? Okay. Somebody. Jen has a Sag rising. Excellent. Very good, Jen. All right, well, thank you so much, guys, for joining today to be with me for the next 90 minutes. We might even be together a little bit longer than 90 minutes, but hopefully close to 90. And I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate that you took your resources and your time to be with me today. I'm very excited. There's a lot that we're going to be covering today that's going to be very exciting. Just to tell you guys a little bit about myself, for those of you who are here for the very first time, who don't know me yet or only know me through my weekly forecasts or my bi-monthly video blogs on YouTube. I'm originally from Austria, from Vienna. I was raised there, and when I was 21 years old, I moved to the United States of America, and I lived in New York for 20 years. Then I moved to Chicago, and then I moved to Pittsburgh, where I'm right now, just since 3 or 4 months I've been here. So this is my journey, and I've been studying astrology since the early 90s. So I have a pretty good foundation of astrology and what there is to know. But even that said, I'm still learning, I'm still expanding, I'm still growing. Even with astrology, it's a lifelong passion, a lifelong tool that I want to learn more about as I go along. So there's always more to do. Now, the agenda for this webinar is that we'll be talking about Jupiter moving through Scorpio. It's switching signs next week on October 10th from Libra to Scorpio, and it will be in this powerful sign until November 2018. So I thought that really focusing on that transit is going to be very powerful for us because it will affect us for quite a long time. Now, the questions that we're going to be answering in this webinar today will be, where is Jupiter and Scorpio in our own birth charts? Where is that journey taking place, right? What houses are going to be affected? What aspects does it make during these year-long transits, right? And then how does a wise response from one house support a fruitful response to the next house? Because, as planets are moving through the houses, there's a lesson for each of the transits or there's something that we're exploring or experiencing during that time with that energy being in that area of our lives. And the next house that it moves into, it's kind of like it builds that energy. If we've done the house before really well, then the next house will be a little bit easier, right? Or it will build on that. So we can kind of take a look at how does that work with the houses, right? And I'll be going into that a little bit in more detail today. then also what outward opportunities arise when Jupiter interacts with any of our personal planets. Now, hopefully we'll be able to get to as much as possible today. I won't make any promises because obviously the time always flies when we have these webinars. But, you know, this is definitely also a subject that, you know, we could spend a whole day on, right? But we only have 90 minutes. So I'm going to try and get through as much as possible, all right? Now, the format today will be just a little bit differently from what we normally have. So for those of you who've been with me before, I just wanted to give you a heads up so that there are no surprises. We will talk mostly about the Jupiter transit. And then I also have to make some very awesome announcements that I'm very excited about. So I want to make sure that all of you can hear about it. And then when we're done with all of that, then we're going to address the Q&A and we're going to go into questions because some of you had questions also about the full moon in Aries. So I will be answering some of those questions at the very end of the webinar as well. All right. Now, as far as charts go, I can't pull up people's charts during the webinar because it takes up too much time. If I already have your chart because you're a client of mine or because you've sent the chart to me via email, then I have it printed out right here in front of me. But if I don't have your charts, then please just make sure you tell me very exactly what you want from me, where your planets are, and what you're talking about so I can answer your questions as best as possible. Now, what I also always say with each of these webinars, I would like to focus on questions that are connected to what we're covering this month. So if we can focus on questions that are connected to the Jupiter and Scorpio transit, that would be great. However, I know that a lot of you also had questions about the full moon in Aries because there's so much energy going on with that full moon. So I will address some of those questions at the very end of the webinar as well. Okay, so don't freak out, don't worry. You will all be taken care of as much as I can, okay? All right, so let's move on to the next page in our webinar. So one of the things that I always email you guys is I send you a yearly overview of all the planets, and this is something that I think is very useful to kind of like take a look at. So if you have it on your computer, or if you have it printed out, you know, pull that out and just take a look, you know, what's going on this month. And one thing that I want to invite you to do is, as you're seeing some of these things that are, because these are like the most important like things that are happening in the month of October. If you don't know how to apply this to your own chart, or if you don't know what any of this means, then definitely always stay in touch with my weekly forecast, stay in touch with my bi-monthly videos, because in those videos and weekly forecasts, I will address, you know, these major aspects and these major planetary movements. Now today, we're mostly going to be focusing on this here because Jupiter, of course, being the huge shift, because Jupiter is like has a 12-year cycle, right? So every 12 years, Jupiter comes back to exactly the same position where it was 12 years prior. Now, Jupiter takes approximately 1 year to journey through each of the signs. And that's why it's a pretty big transit, because it's not like a personal planet that, you know, it takes like a month or a couple of weeks to go through each sign. It takes a whole year. And so we're definitely learning something, you know, when a planet is in a sign for a whole year, right? Now, the last time Jupiter was in Scorpio was October 2005 until November 2006. Okay, so for those 13 months. And then prior to that, if you're old enough to remember that, November 1993 until December 1994. Again, another 13 months, right? So it's either Jupiter, it varies the transit. Sometimes it's 13 months, sometimes it's 12, sometimes it's even a little bit less than 12. So approximately every 12 years we come back. And so we can think back to those times, for example, you know, think back to 2005, 2006, right? The end of 2005, most of the year of 2006. What were some of the things that you learned about in that time frame? You know, what are some new adventures that were created? Were there any deepening processes that you underwent? Something that helped you to get more in touch with a deeper connection with yourself or with other people or with collaborations with other people? Was there anything around that time where you had a brand new beginning of some kind that changed how you looked at the world, you know, or that changed how you viewed your life, right? These are kind of some things that you can kind of investigate and take a look at these dates for yourself and see, you know, where did that show up for you, right? Or what showed up for you during those dates, right? Now, let's take a look at Jupiter's chart. The chart that Jupiter has when it enters Scorpio. So this is the universal astrology chart of Jupiter moving into Scorpio. Okay, and the reason why I say it's the universal chart is because we have Aries on the ascendant, and we have all the signs, you know, the universal kind of how it's lined up universally. So this may not correspond to your own chart in that same way, but this is how it looks like universally. So Jupiter in Scorpio happens at the same time as the ascendant is also in Scorpio. So there's definitely some kind of like, you know, there's definitely like a bit of an unconscious process that's at play with Jupiter entering Scorpio, right? Like we're feeling a little bit like we're needing to really go into the depth of something, right? And but we're not fully aware of yet of what that is yet, right? Now let me talk a little bit about the Jupiter in Scorpio transit. But before I do that, let's kind of backtrack a little bit, because Jupiter is still in Libra right now, and so it's kind of like moving from Libra, which is very relationship oriented and harmonious oriented and balance seeking, and sort of like very you know, wants to find the middle path or wants to find moderation in things, you know. That's kind of the Libra energy, wanting to balance the masculine and the feminine energies, right? For equality. It's very about equality. So Jupiter just has been through the sign for a whole year. And as it's moving out of there, we're now moving into a sign that's very different from Libra, which is much more intense and much more emotionally based, because Libra is very rational and intellectually based. It's a visionary energy, right? Libra is about our vision for our relationships, how we would like to have the type of relationships that we want to have, right? And what do they look like? That equality, that sense of equality. Scorpio, on the other hand, it's much more about emotion. It's much more about our passion for things. It's about tapping into how we can connect on a very deep level with another person or with other people's resources, so that we can gain something that helps us feel empowered or satisfied about our emotional state, right? We want to feel emotionally satisfied, and we want to feel like this authentic emotional connection with other people and commitment with other people. So Scorpio is much more, where Libra is a little bit more like weighing your options and trying to go like, okay, do I want to do this or want to do that? Or, you know, what works best? Or, you know, like Libra kind of sees both sides of the coin, right? Libra always looks at everything in sort of like in an objective way and tries to see, okay, would that be a better choice or would that be a better choice? But very often we're not always really able to make a choice with Libra, because we're seeing all of it, so it gets hard to actually decide, right? Well, Scorpio does not have that problem. Scorpio is all or nothing. It's do or die. Let's get to it. You know, am I committed? Am I in it or am I not in it? You know, am I feeling emotionally connected to it? Yes or no? If I do, great, let's do it. If I don't, let's not do it, right? So that's kind of the Scorpio energy, right? And so for those of you who have Scorpio planets in your chart, especially personal planets, you understand that energy very well, right? Now, the other thing with Scorpio, of course, also is it is also about emotional attachments that we have to the past. And particularly past events or past occurrences that have felt disempowering to us, or where we've experienced a trauma, Okay, so there are emotional patterns that get formed inside our bodies, or inside our emotional bodies or physical bodies as well, where we try to protect ourselves, or where we try to defend ourselves from disempowerment or traumas to reoccur. So Scorpio, that's why Scorpio is a very transformational sign. And that's why it's very important with Scorpio to really look into our unconscious, to look into these drives inside of us, the stuff that's buried deep inside of us, that we're kind of like holding on to, or that we're attached to out of fear or out of anxiety or out of trying to protect ourselves from similar things happening again in the future. And this is important to understand about Scorpio, because we can only transform something when we've made it conscious. As long as stuff is in the unconscious, it cannot be transformed. So the key to Scorpio is to go into the depth of our own traumas, to go into the depth of what has felt disempowered in the past, so that we can make it more conscious, so we can start to feel the feelings consciously, rather than trying to suppress the feelings, trying to deny what we felt at that point when a trauma or a disempowerment happened. And we by making it conscious, we can then start to transform the pain or the trauma that has occurred. But in order to transform it, it has to first be conscious. So we have to be able to see it. We have to be able to feel it and allow ourselves to feel it fully, so that we can integrate it. It's about integration. And so for those of you who've heard of like shadow work, for example, shadow work is very powerful and it is very much connected to the Scorpio energy. Shadow work is all about looking at the denied, fragmented aspects of ourselves that have been suppressed or ignored, and bringing those into our consciousness and working with those shadow parts of ourselves. And the reason why they're called shadow parts, I believe, is because they're very much a part of ourselves. Just like when you walk, and you see your own shadow, that shadow, that's a reflection of you. It's not of somebody else, that shadow, right? So the shadow parts, by allowing ourselves to see that is us, that is a reflection of us, and that something needs to be integrated, that is really the transformative aspect of Scorpio. So what we're doing with Scorpio really is we're trying to clean out the basement, in a sense. We're trying to detoxify ourselves from that heavy, gooky energy that's holding us back from fully stepping into our empowerment and fully stepping into our passion, so that we can really enjoy life, so that we can feel connected with all of life. We can feel fully connected with other people in our relationships. We can have great collaborations with other people, right? And that's only possible if we can integrate our shadow parts, and we can keep our heart open, and we can find a renewed trust in life. Because very often with trauma and with disempowerment, what happens is we lose our trust. We lose our trust towards people, things, places, experiences. We lose our trust for life. Sometimes we also lose our trust in ourselves, depending on where Scorpio is in your chart, right? So in order to regain that trust, in order to live full out, we have to really integrate that Scorpio energy. And that brings me to the Jupiter transit in Scorpio. So what's Jupiter all about? Well, Jupiter is about expansion. It's about the process of learning something and being able to find a new meaning in whatever we're exploring, right? So with Jupiter in Scorpio, of course, you have to think of Jupiter kind of like a magnifying glass, right? Jupiter kind of like whatever Jupiter touches, wherever Jupiter connects or goes into, whether that's a sign, a house, a planet, Jupiter puts a magnifying glass on that energy, right? And so because astrology is all energy, the signs are energy, the planets are energy, the houses are a particular area of our lives, but they also represent the particular energy. So with Jupiter being that magnifying glass, we're seeing whatever it's touching more magnified and bigger, and we start to have a new understanding or a new perspective because of that. Hopefully the perspective is one where we can learn something that helps us move forward and that helps us be in greater alignment with ourselves. But of course, Jupiter, because it's the magnifier and the expansion of things, it expands everything. It doesn't just expand the good stuff, right? So it expands all of it. But that's where consciousness comes in, right? So for each one of us, individually speaking, what we really want to pay attention to is how can we consciously use this magnifying glass? And is it going to be consciously magnifying what we can use this energy for in a way that supports us and empowers us? Or are we going to ignore what we can do with this and just unconsciously let whatever gets magnified get magnified, right? And then we might deal with some of the lower vibrations of Scorpio as well, or some of the planets that it's connecting with, right? So that's a choice, of course, that we as people who know about astrology or students of astrology have. We have the choice to consciously work with the energies of a transit. And so this is very empowering and this is very powerful. Now, Jupiter, of course, will sort of magnify in Scorpio all that unconscious stuff, all that stuff that needs to be addressed, that has been suppressed and that has been, denied within ourselves. So that's one thing. But the other thing that it also magnifies is sort of like this attitude of like all or nothing, do or die. It will magnify these attitudes within people for the better or worse. So that's something that we can, for ourselves, what we need to be conscious about is how can we use this all or nothing attitude in a way that serves us rather than in a way that is destructive, whether that's self-destructive or destructive towards other people. We need to be conscious of that, right? We need to see it and see, okay, how can I use this to make powerful decisions that are in alignment with my highest emotional vibration rather than coming from fear. Because when we come from fear, of course, then we're in our lower emotional vibrations, and then we're very often, this all or nothing attitude can become destructive. It can be a lashing out towards other people, or it can be a lashing out towards ourselves, or we can start to have destructive behaviors, and that includes addictions of all sorts, or we can start to do things that are just not healthy for ourselves, right? But even when we're going into these lower vibrations, even when we're going into these dark places with Jupiter in Scorpio, there is, with Jupiter there is an opportunity to see what we're doing. There's an opportunity to bring more of a learning process to whatever it is that we're exploring. It's an exploration. And so even if we're going into addiction, or even if we're going into the darker sides of Scorpio, Jupiter can kind of give us the opportunity to kind of change our mind about it, or to have a new perspective on the darker sides of Scorpio as well, right? So that's what I want to say. Oh, also Jupiter, of course, will magnify anything in connection to money, power, sexuality, other shared resources or other people's resources, and emotional vitality, right? Because Scorpio is very much about, our passion for life. So that is an emotional vitality that makes our physical body feel more alive, right? And so that's what Jupiter is doing as well. Now, in order for us to attract fortune or or to have beautiful things happen to us while Jupiter is in Scorpio, it is helpful for us to kind of really dive deeply into something, to really give our all to something on an emotional level, to really give our, like, really be fully passionate with the things that we're engaging in, and to use our own magnifying powers to support and heal other people. You know, so if you have a gift or a talent, you know, where you can really dig deep into your own unconscious or other people's unconscious, you know, if you have a lot of Scorpio planets in your natal chart, then you would be someone who is good at supporting other people on that journey that we're on right now with Jupiter in Scorpio. So finding alliances, deep, meaningful alliances that help us go into that depth is really beneficial at this time, right? So let's see, what else do I want to say? I think I've said mostly everything. Oh, because Scorpio is also about other people's resources, this can also be a time where we can find more possibility around financial collaborations with other people, you know, coming together and supporting each other, not just financially, but also with our gifts and talents that we have to offer. So, you know, really coming together and what's different from, you know, Libra to Scorpio here is that with Libra, it's all more on the idea level, right? Everything is sort of more on the idea level. When it comes to Scorpio, we're dropping into a deep emotional place. So it comes from a place of like really wanting to deeply connect. And just remember, because Scorpio is also connected to our traumas, there can also be a connection to, you know, wanting to connect with other people who have had similar traumas than ourselves, wanting to understand other people's traumas. There might also be more of a magnifying glass towards, you know, needing to survive, because Scorpio has a very strong survival instinct. And because of whatever disempowerment we have experienced, this sense of survival tends to be very strong in us, right? Now, I have here a question from Jen. What if you have 0 Scorpio planets, but double Scorpio on 11th and 12th house?